the schools we're surrounded by, a sense of genuinely belonging, a sense of aspiration. The headmaster talks about excellence, integrity and leadership as being values that are at the core of Reading School today. And I can imagine that was the same when you were here, that the challenge to push yourself, to do the best that you could, and to find ways to lead mattered as much then as they do now. So we still have a flourishing CCF. Those of you who are members of that might be dismayed to hear that Kendrick girls now come and join us.
Not today. I mean officially.
I mean officially. The cadet force is now paid for by the boys who contribute. The MOD's struggled a little bit to fund it as it used to. Some things have changed. We've lost the range temporarily whilst the new science block has been built. And the armoury doesn't quite match the required standards of the MOD these days, though perhaps I shouldn't be telling you that. But the CCF still flourishes, as do sports and activities and music. Indeed, the music department's really gone from strength to strength in recent years. We still do our very best competing with an awful lot of the local public schools. We don't do quite so well as we used to at rugby, slightly better. At football, when I was here as a boy myself, yeah, I know. We would have been having 11 games of football in the quad 20 years ago, and now we're eating scones instead. I'm not quite sure what that says about healthy schools. It's all scone, thank you very much. So much genuinely does remain the same, but an awful lot has changed too. And I think that's probably in part to do with changes in society and the moving goalposts that schools face. Genuinely, it's difficult ensuring that we keep hold of our roots whilst we're measured for our attainment and tested for the progress that the boys make. Maintaining the argument that school is about more than certification really matters to us. And I think the educational climate has changed in the UK so that many boys see school as a springboard to university and £30,000 of debt. As a consequence, those grades matter to parents phenomenally much. And we keep arguing that it's not just grades, that boys aren't brains on legs. So trying to encourage those roots and those values, despite the change in climate and circumstance, remains a challenge. You'll also see that lots has changed in terms of the site. That's a big challenge as a state-funded school. We continue to find that our funding is sliced, so finding ways to repair and improve facilities is tricky. You might notice, for example, when you wander around the school, that we still have a swimming pool. That's really good news. We don't have any water in it. We do still have a swimming pool. We need £180,000 to repair the pipe, so there's a pool but no water. You'll note that we've got a £3 million science block that's just about finished. We're 6 months behind. Anyone who wants to sponsor an element would be warmly welcome. The builders are about to down tools because they've been a bit slow and there's real challenges in getting that work finished. So actually improving and repairing the facilities on the school site represent a genuine challenge. The school is eager to carry on flourishing and growing, to take on fine minds and give them every opportunity. We're still an environment where boys pull each other along, where aspiration and hope and expectation are the raw ingredients that make the school so successful. But lots has changed in terms of teaching. You might be surprised at the sheer number of flat screens around the school site. We're told there are now more iPads and laptops than there are teachers in school. There are computers in just about every space, and that might be good news to you. On the other hand, you might lament the fact that woodwork has disappeared.
Right.
The curriculum represents something that changes constantly. So we find ourselves always trying to work out and imagine what might be the path future for the boys. So whilst we've lost some of the technological subjects, we've increased our computer science space. And that continues to be very popular. As do the sciences, maths, economics, and the aspiration of many of our boys are to go on and study economics or engineering. Still an awful lot of boys go and study medicine. Less study law and humanities, and that's probably a change represented across the UK in terms of university admissions. So lots has changed. It's hard to argue with parents that education is about getting muddy, and having experience and making mistakes. That's our claim, that really it does matter, that everyone who comes through this door contributes and shares something of the sense of family and community that's represented in Reading School. And I hope as you share together one with another, you might feel that all over again, that you might feel just as optimistic, just as welcomed as you did all those years ago when you turned up as an 11-year-old. It really is a joy to have you back, and I hope you'll feel, perhaps not quite that you've never been away, but, but just as valued, and just as important, and just as much a part of the life of the school, which after all has been shaped by balls being kicked through windows and graffiti being etched on walls. Thank you so much for coming back. I hope you have a fantastic day.
Now, one of the joys of today is that there are lots of anecdotes whizzing around the group. I learned this morning that in my last few weeks in East Wing, one of my compatriots, 7th formers, I got blind drunk on a bottle of rum combined with cider, and that apparently I cleared it all up. And this was all, of course, to keep it out of the sight of the housemaster. So that's just one small story. But however, our next speaker, Ned Holt, who is presently president of the ORs, has a story about himself as well, which some of you may have participated in. Apparently, Ned was in the 2nd form when you all arrived in the 1st form, and one of his immediate power plays as a 2nd former was to jump the lunch queue down at the old refectory. I can see a few heads nodding, so a few people remember this. Now, Ned was slight of frame in those days, and despite this amazing power play, he was pushed to the back of the queue and told to take his place and wait. Anyway, over to Ned.
If the first part of that is true, then the second part of it would certainly be true without any doubt at all. Because yes, slight is actually quite flattering. I did this in my year last year, and several people said, "Oh, you're looking young." And I said, "Well, thank you, but I'm not taking that from you lot, because when we were all 16, I looked about 12. So if I'm cashing in any chips 40 years later, I'm entitled to it." Well, the food's better, isn't it? Thank you, in the kitchen. Again, welcome to everybody. I was going to thank Michael, but I'm not sure. No, I am, because you know it's been a fantastic amount of work. I hope he gets to enjoy the day, rather than just going around organising. You may not know that not only has he done this, but he basically did the same for a completely different year group yesterday, where the payback in terms of his own enjoyment would be less, I'm sure, though it went very well. So, fantastic, Michael. It's been organised one for my year last year. It's a peculiar experience because, and you may have sort of had a bit of this yourselves, what you're dealing with is a collection of people who are fixed in your mind at an age somewhere between 11 and 18. So you make tentative contact with what you can't quite get away from thinking is an adolescent. And so what you're expecting to hear is, "And you, Ned Holt?" Yeah. Actually, what you get is, "Ned, how nice. What a pleasure to hear from you." Yes, of course, I'd love to come, and that's great. And it's difficult knowing quite how to pitch this, because I'm aware. I said this to the group yesterday, and I suspect I'm almost sure, we may have just been that bit later and it'd been slightly different, but it became obvious to me talking to people that some people were utterly nostalgic and wanted to discover nothing had altered, and others were utterly traumatised, damaged for life, and wanted to hear the place had essentially been razed to the ground and started again. And unsurprisingly, the truth, is somewhere in between the two. And listening to Chris, the second time in 2 days I've had to go after Chris, and talking about drawing the short straw. Listening to him, I think it's obvious that something at the heart that I believe was always right, actually, has survived, but much has altered around it. And one of my briefs in speaking from Michael was to talk about, you know, things that have changed. When I came back to teach here in 1982, and I then spent 30 years here, which is not quite what I expected, but it became clear to me that something I hadn't realised when we were here, which was that we arrived at the school just as it was changing in certain ways, because there'd been an influx of young staff at that point. Now that happens every now and then in the sort of cycle of a school's history. I can tell you, it's happened really in the last 5 or 6 years, and you know, I left coming up to 4 years ago, and I thought the staff when I left was as good and as delightful to work with as at any point in my time here. But we arrived in that sort of moment where a new group of young staff have turned up. Some of them are here, though they don't quite fit in appearance now with that particular description. But some of the people I remember turning up who made a difference and went on making a difference for a long time in some cases are here today, and you know, I'm sure you're really pleased or intrigued at least to see them. So, what's changed over a longer period? One of the things that interests me as a teacher of history, obviously change interests me, is there were some things that were decisions. Easy ones, difficult ones, contentious ones. Saturday morning went. That was one of the more contentious ones, though. Probably lived up neither to the fears or the hopes of the two camps discussing it. But that was quite a change, and it affected other things. Probably not as much as might have been the case, and certainly as those worried about it feared. So that was something which was a decision. On the other hand, there were sort of steady, organic change that came quietly disappeared. Yeah, I know, good job. But it wasn't contentious, it wasn't a decision. Suddenly, you know, was a debate? No. You just suddenly thought, well, it's gone. Nobody's using it. And before that was a response to the law, it just went. Slowly we discovered we were calling all the students by their first names. Instead of... It's interesting, it was just the same yesterday. That just changed. I think we probably sort of started with the sixth form, and well, this is getting a bit ridiculous, we can't go on calling them down and whatever, and it went down through the school, but there it was, without anybody ever sort of having a debate about it. So, sort of organic change. Football's already been mentioned, but yeah, football came in, I've got to mention it just for Roger's sake, after all, I mean, close to his heart. Again, far less contentious than anybody of our era could possibly have imagined. It turned up for all sorts of practical reasons, introduced quietly because hockey was becoming tenable in many ways. No, it didn't destroy the rugby. The rugby is as vibrant as it's ever been. And after a few years, they even started to play out on the field, which you know would have seemed unlikely, I suppose, in our day. But football's come in, that's another one. And, well, yeah, right, exactly. So you would not be alone if you'd said that then, without a doubt. And something that I think has affected the school enormously, I'm sorry, this is going to be a bit of a dull one, but back in the 80s, there was a real debate about what school should be, and it wasn't the one that we were with, you know, which was really a philosophical one about selection back in the 60s, early 70s. The simple fact was that, you know, the correct thing to say about this school's history was the free grammar school of the borough of Reading. Well, only two of those things have remained, because in the 80s, the number of boys and girls as well, obviously, affected Kendrick too, in the borough of Reading was falling, a number of secondary school age pupils. So the proportion coming to Reading and Kendrick was increasing. Things were becoming unviable for other schools. The practical debate was, do you close Reading and Kendrick or transform them into something else? Or do you allow Reading and Kendrick to take pupils from a far wider field? Where do you live? Ooh, old school, where do you live? Coley Park, we're doing well. Now, you will admit that's a very atypical threesome, isn't it?
It proves your point.
But there are probably more students in the school from the borough of Wokingham now than the borough of Reading. That sense of it being a very local school has been lost. Sad, I think, but probably a price well worth paying to preserve the other two bits of the three things. It's still free, boarding fees aside. It's still free, still a grammar school. People come from a bit more far and wide. It's affected Chris's life in boarding because there'll be some borders here. I don't know where the closest one in terms of residence would have been, but quite possibly within walking distance, because the borough boundary was just up there. That's couldn't possibly happen now, really.
Up there. Between Berkshire and Oxfordshire was a
I'm not talking about the other side of the river in the cigar smoke. I mean up here. It's just up the road. That's changed the school quite a bit. And I suppose inevitably the whole admissions industry of the last 10 or 15 years and that change has made the school more thoroughly middle class. Or it might have done, but for the issue of ethnicity. Because, I left 4 years ago, I would say the intake in a year then was over a quarter who would not have ticked the white British box. It's probably higher than that now, Chris, I would guess.
Yes, as an RE teacher, I can say that about a third of the boys who come in year 7 are of a Hindu background, for example. So I'd say ethnic mix is very representative of the area, but probably white is becoming a significantly diminished ethnic group locally and in the school. So we're pretty representative of the local area.
And they're the people for whom the old grammar school dream of transforming lives is probably still really true, and long may it survive, I would say. So that things like that have changed. Atmosphere, yes, it has. At some point, I think, between our era and today, there may well have been the realisation, the penny dropped, that with very bright boys who wanted to do well, actually, you could relax quite a bit. I think it's fair to say steadily it's become a lot more fun, or maybe a different type of fun, not quite so sort of all against the rules. It's not a strict school, I think it's true to say. Is that fair, Chris?
Yeah, again, I'd say there's not so much need to maintain very black and white boundaries, because almost all the boys really understand what's best for them and those around them.
Right? Good. So it's changed in those sort of ways, but something I think, which I do remember as a student, and when I first came as a member of staff, has remained sort of true at its heart. Michael observed that it had changed only a few weeks ago. We came in to address the year 13s who are leaving. Do you want me to say anything about membership, or are you going to?
Go ahead. After you.
Right, well, we decided that all leavers, you didn't have to sign up and join the ORs, all leavers would be made members of the association. In a year's time, that'll apply to you and you'll be very welcome. So we came in, we were told we can talk to the leavers meeting, which is basically an exam briefing. Martin Savage in our day, remember? Don't steal Lottie. It'd be genius to make a line like that work. I can't, he could. So we came in to address that meeting, and we were told it would be in chapel. Michael turned on, dressed for the occasion, nice boot tie. In we went. Year 13 was sitting there receiving their last information in fancy dress. And as we sat down, he said to me, "Can you imagine what Tony Davis would have had to say?" And what's special about the place to me as a teacher, which was far longer than the pupil, was something I said to that group of students then when I had to stand up. And I said, because Chris had just been addressing them with equal eloquence, and I said, today, year 13's leaving all over the country. There are schools where they will have had to listen to the chaplain, bidding them farewell and giving them all sorts of valuable moral advice. There will be schools where everybody's let their hair down and year 13 are all wearing drag or whatever else you dress up in. There will be very, very few schools where both those things. And that's what I sort of haven't been in that meeting for 4 years, obviously, and I sort of thought, oh well, this is getting to me a bit. But that's what's special about the place. It has changed, but there's something at its heart, as I say,
I'd
which
say
is
Tony
survived.
Davis would have approved of the short hair of all those young men. Not a hair over the ear. That's really good.
Yeah, well, he's not a pupil anymore.
He's obviously a ringer.
Dealing with pupils' appearance has continued to be a challenge. But many, many years ago, in my early years back here, I can remember John Haynes, who was then deputy head, he came into the staff room and he said to the secretary, the headmaster secretary, I'm a bit worried about uniform at the moment. Here's a notice about what they're supposed to wear. Get it typed up again and we'll put it up. And she looked at it, she said, Johnny, it says no flares. Not wearing flares anymore. John said, oh, we'll find out what's in fashion now. Unspoken, whatever it is, bad.
Precisely.
So yeah, yes, I agree, Hayden, you're absolutely right. I've nothing much more to say. You want to talk to each other, not me. Yes, we've got a Lord House. I'm intrigued actually, so for the historians or readers of history, Lord obviously came to the school. The one who interests me has got a tea tray up there, and I've said before, well, this should be on his tea tray. Daniel Blackgrave signed the execution warrant of Charles I. Now that must be just about the most significant brush with history of anybody that's been through this place. And I think it should say that. They must just have been apart in age. I'd love to think of them. Hayden, fantastic material for a historical novel. Yeah. Daniel and William go to school. Absolutely fantastic to see you. I hope you have a good day. If it's awful, you never need to see anybody again. From my experience last year, it wasn't. It was lovely. All I would say is, for reasons which we could all theorise about, and it's something to do with the zeitgeist, the children of the late 60s, early 70s are not massively represented in the membership of the OR Association. Please make sure we are from now on. If there are people who aren't here, who you've got any sort of contact with, we'd love to have them signed up. Right, Michael? But it's just been a delight to see you. Thanks for coming. Cheers.